Okay, everyone, welcome. I'm just waiting for Cynthia to join.
Hi.
Hey! Oh, finally. I was like, oh my god, did I add her or no? How's it
Hi.
going?
It's going okay. I just came home from work, so I am still in my scrubs and a bit of a mess.
Oh my god, yeah. It's doing this on a weekday is hard with everyone's schedule and stuff, but I'm happy we made time. Okay, so everyone is kind of joining. I think we can just get started, because everyone has things to do. It's a weekday.
Yes,
But
sounds good.
so why don't we just introduce ourselves? Cynthia, you go first, then I'll introduce myself, and then we'll kind of go through the outline for today.
Okay, so I'm Cynthia. I am now an intern in anesthesiology. Also a IMG, like many of you guys, and both Meher and I are in the first group of people who did virtual interviews last year. So we thought we'll come together to share like our experiences of virtual interviews, especially because a lot of interviews this year are virtual as well. So we wanted to share how we combated that and help you guys with your journey as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm Meher. I'm a PGY1 in psychiatry in New York. I think Cynthia's in New Jersey. Am I right?
Yes,
And
I
I'm
am.
in New York. We're both on the East Coast. Yeah, so we were 3 months into our training, and we've just been kind of doing these things to kind of help you guys through the way. I think we were the first year to have virtual interviews, so it was different. I still don't know how I felt about it looking back, but it is what it is, and you just have to work with it. But there are some things that you can do now to prepare and make sure that you're a little more confident going into the whole process. So that's what we want to go over today. So in terms of what we're going to talk about, I made like a little outline just so everybody watching kind of knows what we're going to do. So first we'll go over the interview setup. So just physically how you should organize your space. What we use. Did we use a computer stand, lighting, whatever? So we'll quickly talk about that. We'll go over the types of interviews. There's some programs do it differently, and Cynthia can share kind of what experience she had with that. And then we'll go over each type and the common questions they ask in both of them, and then how to prepare for those questions. So like how you can kind of just not like prepare an answer, but just know generally what you will talk about if they ask you a specific question. That's kind of what we'll do. So Cynthia, we can go ahead and start. What is in terms of setup, how did you do yours?
Okay, so I know a lot of people have like different ideas of how it should be set up. And virtual interviews are obviously very like different because you're not going in person and you're not sitting across the table from someone interviewing you. So what I did was I made sure that I had like a space where I knew it was going to be quiet, especially in the daytime because you have like work, like people getting landscaping or like whatever going on in the neighborhood. So that's something that I made sure was important for me, like a quiet space. For me personally, I like a plain white background, kind of like this, because it just kind of limits distraction as well. So no distraction in my background. And even things like a chair, like I use a stool instead of a chair, like with a back like this, because like if you look at this, it's kind of also distracting to have that there when you had a stool. It's just like plain. I know this sounds silly, but they're all little things that you have to think about. And then for my table, I just had like a table in front of me and I made sure that I put some books under my computer so that the height of it was good, like so my head wasn't cut off and that my head was completely in the frame.
Yeah, so very similar things. Because I was moving around for elective rotations, I had to keep changing my setup. But general things that you should have in the setup is a quiet space. So even things like the air conditioning or the fan running in the background can sometimes echo the voice. So if I were you, turn off everything. If you have to sweat, that's fine. Turn off everything, close the windows, because if an ambulance goes past, like all that will come into the interview and you don't want to get distracted. So close the windows, turn off your phone, turn off the notifications on your computer. You don't need anything ringing when this is happening. I had a ring light, so like all the bloggers use it. I don't know, this like round ring light thing that sits behind your computer screen. So that way, like it just kind of like I have it on right now, so if you don't want to feel like wearing makeup, it kind of just like the light just makes you look better, I guess. So just do that. That's something easy you can do. Definitely prop up the computer. You want the the lens of the camera on the laptop to be the height of your eyes. You shouldn't be like looking down or looking up. That'll just make it look weird. So definitely have that. And then in terms of dressing, it has to be like professional. So for men, it's like a suit with a tie, the whole works. Keep it simple, nothing shiny, nothing with like some craziness going on, you know, simple, elegant, classy. That should be the vibe. For women, blazer with a nice top or something like that. Simple neutrals, navy blue, white, baby pink, baby blue, you know, yellow, things like that. Nothing too jazzy. So those are the things that you can prepare now, you know, get your suit ready. You can wear the same one to every interview. You don't have to keep changing. So keep it really simple. Don't waste a ton of money on this. And yeah, that's what, that's that in terms of setup, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I agree. Like, so I had two suits that I just alternated between my interviews. But yeah, like keeping it professional, simple. I know some people like think about like having cool backgrounds. And it works for some people, but like I personally, from my experience, simple was best. And from what I saw on my interview trail and seeing other interviewees, most people just went for like a simple approach.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so now let's talk about the types of interviews. So Sandhya, tell us what kind of different like types you encountered.
So during my interviews, most of my interview were like either on Zoom or WebEx, and it's broken up into like small rooms. So we go in, I think you have a morning or afternoon session, you pick, when they give you the time, you can pick, you can go in AM or PM most days. And then I think that usually like 5 of you or 6 of you, depending on the program. And you have a hangout area, like I guess a virtual hangout area where you all sit in the same room and you talk to other interviewees and the program coordinator. And then after that, they will break you up into the small rooms with different interviewers. So the most I had was 4 interviewers, and then average was 3. So it was broken up into 3 different rooms where I go in, I spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes with the interviewer, come back out into like the main room, and then go back in with a different interviewer. So that was like my, from my interview trail, that was my like most common type of interview. And yeah, it was usually like 15 minutes to 20-minute session per interviewer. And I know it sounds really long, but it actually goes by really quickly. And then the sessions in between with the program coordinator is just chill and easy.
Correct. In terms of the questions that the program interviewer, the program directors or whoever was interviewing asked you, were they more like conversational questions, or did you feel like they were following like a standard set of questions?
So it varied. There were some programs where it was definitely like a set of questions that they asked everyone, and you could tell, you know, because they were like some of the common questions when you Google and you find them, and then some of them like were just telling me that, you know, I have a list of questions here that I have to ask, so they just asked me that. And then some, I think it's mainly program directors that keep it more conversational, because they're the ones who like, you know, like want to just have a conversation with you and see if you fit into their program. So whenever I was with like a program director or an APD, it was just like conversational chats. They may ask like some formal questions. But with the other interviewers, it's mainly like formal questions. I don't know if that was the same for you and your experience.
Correct. So I had one of my interviews, and I'll just say the program because it'll help you. The Arrowhead Regional Medical Center in Southern California had across all departments, so no matter what residency program it was, they had this weird like template. It was like they had 2 versions of it, like A and B. It was the collection of the most bizarre questions. Like it was those typical, like those annoying questions, like if you could, you know, what type of people annoy you, you know, and it's like, what are you supposed to say? Because no matter what you say, they're going to hold it against you, you know? So it was like, they would ask things like that, nothing personal. Like I tried to tie all the questions back to me to talk about my resume and stuff, but they were just such bizarre questions. Like it was things like that. You know, like, oh, if you encountered something unethical going on, like what would you do, you know? So like now you have to think, like, do you rat out the person who did it, or do you cover for them? Which one do they want? Like, what are you supposed to do? So it was a very stress. It was my first interview, I remember, but the questions were like very like all the questions were like this. I was waiting for a question to be like, you know, tell me why you want to do psych, but that never came. So
Yeah.
that was definitely one way of interviewing. And then all the others were very colloquial, very personable, like just a conversation, like, oh, so tell me about yourself, why are you interviewing with us? What's going on? And then you just carry the conversation.
Yeah.
But there will be some programs who clearly are asking you a bunch of weird questions, but you need to be prepared to answer them if you don't have the ability to make stuff up on the spot. So
Yeah, I agree.
we'll go over how to prepare for those hard questions that I don't even know what the right answer is because I didn't match there. So I'm like, I probably answered them wrong. But we can go over just general rules, like what not to say, like generally. And then, yes, there's a question somewhere. Let me see.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions.
What do you recommend to say when asked, tell me about yourself? So I don't know, Cynthia, you can talk about, I basically start from the beginning. I say where I was born. I talk about where I was raised. I talked about, if I moved, because I moved around a lot, I talked about the whole journey. And then I eventually led it like quickly, like a few seconds. And then I led it to, how I am in this position, applying for residency, why I wanted to do psych. And so that's how I did it. I started all the way from like the day I was born. But like really,
yeah, I was the same. So when that was actually probably the question I was asked in almost every single one of my interview. And I feel like that's definitely a question that everyone can expect to be asked during interviews. Tell me about yourself. So I would think of it as like, your elevator pitch of like what you want to say about you. If you have like 3-4 minutes, or that's 2-3 minutes of what you want everyone to know about you, like summarize it in that short period of time. So I'm the same with you. I started with like my life journey, where I was born, because like you as an IMG as well, like I moved around a lot. So I started with like, I am Malaysian born. I grew up in Australia, went to med school in England. I'm the first doctor in my immediate family. I was advised against med school, but here I am. And then a lot of time they were like, oh, laughing about it, because I was like, okay, that's like you want something quick and easy for them to grab their attention, and then you can go into why you're there.
Yes, I like that, because you can make them laugh a little bit, make the conversation a little lighter. That's always great. So exactly what Cynthia did, I think, is great. Do not jump right into like, this is why you should hire me. Let them know who you are. Like, talk about your family a little bit, talk about how you grew up, just a little bit. You don't have to like tell them everything about your whole life, but just give them a sense of where you're coming from, and I think that will go a long way. Yes. So we can just answer questions. I feel like that's what people want. But what is the standard time for tell me about yourself? Like how long you should take to answer the question? I think a minute or two.
Yeah, I would say like 2, max 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It honestly, like when you start talking, it goes by a lot faster than you think.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
Yeah, like we've been saying, just keep it to like things that you feel are important for them to know about you. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, I was the top scorer in my school or whatever, because everything that they've seen on the paper, like, in your applications, they've already seen. You're like getting an interview, you're sitting in front of their screen because they like what they saw on your application. They like your scores, they like what you've done in med school, they like, all of those things. So right now it's you, and you need to sell you and the person you are to them.
Correct. Okay. So we went over the types of questions. So the questions that are coming in through the chat now are more like the conversational questions. The other type of questions are going to be the rubric that they have, which is like, tell me, like someone asked, like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. What would you do in a ethical situation? We can talk about some of those, because now we're just going to talk about questions for the rest of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. So do you want to talk about, so a few people asked about like preparing questions about weaknesses and strengths. Do you want to share about how you went about that?
So, okay. So so everybody obviously has different strengths and weaknesses, right? The aim when you're answering the question is that of course you highlight your strengths. You say, for example, so I'll say that I'm very organized. I'm very efficient. I'm able to, and you can always tie it back to like an example of like how you've been in your whole life. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm organized in the hospital. You can just say generally, so you can say, I've always been that kid who got picked on for being very, neat and tidy in school, things like that, and I think that translates well to me being a resident and a medical student, because I'm able to, see a lot of patients, organize everything about them in a way that makes sense to me. So, that can be a strength. With your weaknesses, you should highlight them, but it can't be like, you cannot say like, oh, I'm lazy, like the no. So it needs to be something that's still a strength, but it's like, it can also be a weakness. So for example, I would say something like, I think, and this is what I said, sometimes I get so carried away with, always working, always being in the hospital, always studying, that I forget that life is a journey, and I forget to, live in the moment. So I'll say something like that. So to them it's like, okay, this girl is just like low-key a gunner, just trying to do everything. But it's it can be played both sides. It's not like you're saying that, oh, I'm not hardworking, I'm lazy, I'm not on time. Like, don't say any of those things. You have to say something that can be spun as a strength as well. So that's how I would answer that question. And also remember, even if you have prepared answers to these questions and like, what you're going to say, don't just like say it. It's okay to take a minute to think about it. Be like, oh, that's such a great question that you asked me. Like, no one's, asked me this before, and then start off, because it shouldn't be like, oh, this girl's just memorized everything. And now, because they need to feel like it's a conversation. So that is, I would say, how I would answer that question.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what you said. Like, I think it's so important to remember not to memorize your answers, because they can tell when you've memorized answers. And a lot of people have asked me, like, how do you prepare? Did you do like courses and stuff? And I think it's important to have like answers in your head, brainstorm, but don't have them memorized word for it, because they can tell that this is the answer you're repeating and reusing. And then that doesn't allow flow in conversation, because you're just regurgitating what you think and what you've remembered. Whereas if you answer your question as a conversation, that allows a flow in conversation.
Correct.
And like in terms of the weakness one, I think that's a lot harder to talk about, because you don't want, like you said, you don't want them to think like, oh yeah, this person has like this huge flaw. You want it to be a good thing as well. And that's something that I also struggle with. But like the answer that I use commonly was, I said that I had like a very deep level of empathy, which is good as a doctor, but at the same time, it was a lot on myself mentally. And I said that I didn't know how to draw like boundaries for myself sometimes, which can affect me and my like ability to perform as a resident.
Yeah, so you can say, and that's great. That's another great example. So think of answers along these kind of lines that can be spun as a positive thing as well, and not just a flaw. So I think, yeah, those are two good examples. Okay, next question. How do you answer the question, why should we choose you over others who are well qualified? I never got this question.
I didn't either. Like, I mean, they always ask, why should we pick you, but never like over others who are well qualified. And again, like a why should we pick you question is again like what your strengths are, because like why, like you as a person, what stands out about you, and why should they pick you? And I like I was asked this question a lot, and one times I was asked it, the interviewer told me at the end that, like, this is what we look for in a resident. Are you those things? So I think it's always remember to reiterate that you are a hardworking resident. That's like the biggest and most important thing they want to know, that you're willing to work hard and work well with their team. So even if you don't have a great answer, like, like you could say like, you won't regret hiring me because I will work hard. I'm not going to disappoint you. And like, I'll get along with people. Like, simple, but honest.
Correct. I think you can, if they ask you something like this, let's say, I don't know where everyone is, at academically, but for example, when I was interviewing, my step scores were something that I was very aware of that are low. And I was like, okay, I was expecting some questions about that, like maybe they'll say like, oh, we worry that, you may not be able to cope with the workload and studying, whatever. I was prepared for all those questions. So in a question, if they ask you something like this, you can use that to your advantage. You can say, I think there's lots of qualified people. Everybody here is, excelling in everything that they want to do. But I think my trajectory and the circumstances that have led me to this position show that I am not afraid of working hard, not afraid of picking myself up when things don't go my way. So if you have a low step one score, you can say that. But then I'm also able to overcome that and do better. So let's say you did better on step 2, you can use that. And, you can say that, these are qualities that I think will make me a better resident, because I know there will be hard days. I know there will be days that, really push you to your edge, but you need residents who are able to let that all go and reset and come back again and work hard and continue to do better. So you can also frame it like that. Yeah. So you can spin it like that. You can also spin the same thing if you had like a hard life. Let's say, family issues, parents passed away, no support. You can also spin it like that, being like, I've had to do a lot of it myself. I've had to support myself through this journey. It's been financially, emotionally very draining, but I am very confident in my ability to always move forward. And I think that would help me as a resident. So you can even spin it like that. So just think of, a couple of things that you may want to talk about, and then you can always expand on it during the conversation, depending on who you're interviewing with. So that's how I would.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, because I was also very aware of my step 1 score. And actually it came up in one of my interviews where, my interview was like, I know that you have mentioned in your personal statement that's something you're worried about, but honestly, that's not what we're looking at. We want to know how you be as a resident. So again, it's back to just being yourself, because they just want to know that when they talk to you and they see you over a screen, you're someone that they want and can work with.
Yes. So if you get the interview, they already want you. So you should, there's some level of confidence that comes with getting that invite to the interview. The interview is just for them to see, can they picture you in their program? Can they see you as someone they will work with? Honestly, a lot of it is also physical. How you look matters. There's this whole study about the more attractive people get more interviews, all this stuff. But there are things you can do. Make sure you're presented well, hair neatly done, makeup little bit, all this helps. They just want to make sure that they can imagine you in their program. Step 1, all that stuff, they've already looked at all that and they gave you the interview. So now you just have to kind of fit what they're looking for.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Because it's just about knowing that you're someone they can connect with.
Exactly.
So I'm going to read the next question that we were asked. So it says, is it true that people who get interviews early are easily forgotten when it comes to time for ranking?
I don't think so. So from what I know is that they usually have a scoring system for the interviews. So after every interview, so each program has their rubric. They usually ask you, they have 5 different categories or something, and each category gets 5 points. So let's say her personality, her grades, her demeanor, the way she answered questions, right? And then after your interview, each of the people who interviewed you will grade you. And then they basically add up those scores and then they keep it. So that's at least what I know. And then towards the end of the interview season, they kind of just rank those scores. So people who did really well on the interviews, I guess, get ranked higher. People who didn't do so well get ranked lower. And then of course, if they, they move things around just to balance out the class or whatever it may be. So I don't think you'll get forgotten. I think that's not something to worry about.
Yeah, it's almost all template rubrics, and one important way to not get forgotten about as well is to, after your interviews, if a program allows it, send a thank you email, because that will bring your name up to their inbox. And you can send one to each interviewer, you can just send one to the program as a whole. And then again, when you come to making your rank list, if this is a highly ranked program for you, send them an email again and let them know, because then your name will keep coming up and they won't forget you.
Yeah, I agree. There's a question, what kind of difficult clinical psych questions were you asked? Do you need to read some psych theory? No one is going to be quizzing. Well, on my psych interviews, I never got quizzed about anything psych related. The only thing I got is like, why did you choose psychiatry? And then you just talk about why you chose that, but nothing. No one's going to ask you about medications and about mania and about dig fast and all that stuff. So no, so you don't have to worry about that. I got some people, I think in internal medicine or something, who had like a couple of cases. Like they were like, oh, patient comes in and with like shortness of breath, and then they asked you what would you do next or something. So
yeah, there are some programs that do clinical scenarios, but most don't. And the closest thing you get to a clinical scenario is like an ethical question, like what would you do in this situation, like ethically. That does get asked in interviews, but yeah, you're not expected to know like specific things about the specialty when you apply.
Yeah. There's a couple about visas. I don't know, Cynthia, you know this. When should I tell them that I want an H-1B visa over a J-1? Will it affect my chances?
I would wait until after your interview. Like the visa status is like, yeah, once you get offered a position, if a program offers an H-1B, you can work that out with the program, and you can also, I mean, some programs have requirements for an H-1B, so I would like wait until after your interview. You don't want to bring it up in an interview and then like make it a point where they kind of like have like a little mark on you. Like, so just keep it to after your interview.
Correct. Someone asked, can you say a few things we should never say in the interview? So we can go over that. I just wanted to highlight a few things. So when you get the interview invite, either at that same moment or before your actual interview, you will get an email from the secretary giving you like the information about the pay, about the vacation days sometimes, or like the amount of like rotations, things like that. So if you get that, great, you know how much they're going to pay you. It's pretty much standard across where you live. It just depends on, like, people in New York get paid more than somebody in Alabama because rent is more expensive here. I mean, I still think the people in Alabama are better off because the tax is just less there. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a couple of $100 here and there. It doesn't really matter. So you don't really have to worry about that. But I wouldn't ask that directly to the program director. So let's say they don't send you that email. You have no idea how much you get paid. You have no idea, like if they have vacation, how much vacation. I would save that for the session with the residents, because then you can ask like more just, these basic questions. I would not ask the program director or any of the attendings interviewing you anything about money, anything about vacation, anything about you taking time off for personal reasons, like nothing of that sort.
Yeah.
I would save that for residents.
I agree. Yeah, like so on that note, we should talk about, so I'm just going to quickly talk about meet and greets. Most interviews that you have a virtual meet and greet the night before, 2 nights before, where you sit, like, again, it's going to be virtual on Zoom. Sometimes they may send you stuff. So like I've had parcels sent to me with like chocolates and things like that. Or like sometimes they just tell you to bring a drink. And you sit with the residents and you just chat about the program. And that's very, very informal, casual. You don't have to wear you don't have to wear your suits and stuff. You can just be in like whatever you want to be. And that's when you can ask all the informal questions. Like, think of it as talking to your friend. But then on the day of the interview, that's when you keep like your more formal questions and questions about like education, curriculum, and the program itself. And like Meher said, things about pay, vacation, leave, save that for resident virtual meet and greet.
In terms of things never to say, don't mention the word lazy. Don't mention the word like, oh, I don't want to come to work every day. Like nothing of that sort. You want to. What else should you like really not say? Practice speaking, so you're not saying likes and ums the whole time. Practice making eye contact. A lot of this depends if you're able to. Some people are really shy. They're a little socially awkward even in person. So these interviews will be hard for you. So practice a little bit in front of the mirror with family, whatever, till you can be familiar doing this, and then do the virtual interview. But for people who are very social, have no problem talking to anybody on the street, this is probably going to be easier for you. So just figure out who you are and then just practice if you need to. So yeah, I think that's.
And with the practicing, especially because it's virtual, one thing you can do is do virtual practices with family and friends, like, on Zoom or FaceTime, whatever, and record that virtual recording so you can watch back and see how you were on the recording and like, hey, oh, I did this and I don't actually like what I did. So you can pick it up when you watch back on it.
Correct. Does it matter when you schedule your interview early versus later? No, I would just schedule it as soon as possible because they only send out X number of invites every year. So if the spot's gone, the spot's gone. So just make sure you get a spot. It doesn't matter when you do it. Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah. Do interviews send out invites in waves, or do they do it every day? I'm trying to see how many I should expect based on how many I've gotten so far. I think it varies from program to program because there are some programs and some specialties where they have specific dates where they're only allowed to send out interviews, and then some programs just send it out by the day, and some do send it out in waves. In terms of waves, there's usually like 2 main waves. They send out the first wave, and then whatever is like not accepted, they send out the second wave, and then they trickle in whatever is left. So it really depends on each program and each specialty. But I would say not to be like, not to feel anxious or like deterred at all if you haven't received many, because it's only been a week, and that shows that these programs are really holistically looking at your application. They didn't just put filters and like send out invites based on filters. They're looking at each application as it is. So take that as an encouragement, I would say.
Yes, I agree. Can I talk about overcoming adverse situation like war in my country as a strength, or is it political topic not to talk about? I wouldn't use the word war for sure. I would just say, like unfortunate circumstances in the country I was in, or I would say, a lot of emotional turmoil. I would use words like that. Do not use war and drugs or nothing of that nature. Yeah, and then you
Yeah,
talk
it's
about
hard,
it.
like, because it's hard when you do accidentally cross lines of like political topics. So definitely, like Meher said, you want to be able to talk about the fact that you have overcome an adverse situation, and you definitely want to talk about that because it shows and amplifies your strength. But yeah, like if you can talk about it, like Meher said, turmoils and difficult situations, and what you've been through, without like being political about it, I think it's fine because I like kind of like tiptoed and touched on certain political topics as well in my interview, and yeah, like I mean there were great conversations, but like there was a fine line as to whether or not if I should elaborate on certain things. So
Yeah.
So it says, when you get an interview, do you send an email thanking them, or just scheduling is enough?
Just scheduling is enough.
So like there are a few ways to schedule. Like some of them use Thalamus, some use ERAS, and some will actually get you to email back. So if you have to send an email back, then of course you can say thank you for considering me, and these are the dates I will consider. But the rest of them just schedule it because they will send follow-up emails after that.
What to ask the program director? This is a good question because they will ask you, do you have any questions for us? So like we said, don't mention anything about the payment, like the, what is it called? How much you make.
Yeah,
and vacation and stuff. You can ask things like, for example, for psych, I wanted to do child. I can mention that, I'm thinking about a child adolescent fellowship after residency. Do we get any exposure to those electives early on? Do you have an inpatient child unit? Things like that. So you want to keep it educational. What other examples of things you can ask? I don't know, Cynthia, if you have any.
So fellowship questions are definitely great to ask because it also gives program directors an opportunity to speak highly of their programs. Like they're like, oh, we had this person who met here, and they're very proud of it. So those are definitely good questions to ask. And other questions I ask are like, if you're interested in it, research opportunities and educational opportunities. So like, do I have any opportunities as a resident to teach medical students? And what are research opportunities I have as a resident? And those are good questions to ask. And I do highly recommend whenever you get an interview to read and research about that program, like what they're known for, and you can like create your questions around that.
Correct. So research, research opportunities, fellowship opportunities, and where people have matched and what they end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask when your residents graduate, where do they typically go for work? Because now you're in the real world. This is your job. At the end, your aim is to be employed as a physician somewhere. So it's important for you to know where the residents end up going. Do they all go to fellowship? Do they all work? Does nobody do a fellowship? You can ask about how do your residents do on the board exams. That's a fair question to ask. At the end of every residency program, you have to take the board exam, which means that you're board certified. Some people do fail it. It's important to know how many of the residents fail. If everyone's failing, then there's a problem. You know, if everyone's passing, then that's great. So that you can ask. That's pretty much like the big things to ask.
Yeah.
You can ask like, oh, where are your residents typically coming from? So that'll tell you, because everybody in my program's from New York. So, you know, and I asked that and they're like, oh, everybody lives like an hour away at the max, you know, versus other programs that people coming from all over. It's more diverse. You can ask questions like that.
Yeah. That's...
So you meet the residents twice, informally and formally?
No, so you only meet them, most programs, you only meet them informally the night before. The day of the interview, most of the times residents don't join unless it's chief resident that's also part of the interview. But the day of the interview, it's usually the program coordinator that's coordinating the interview. So you only meet the residents on your meet and greet night before.
Exactly. When should we send the letter of interest?
So for me, when I send emails of interest and letters of interest, I waited like at least 2 weeks after programs receive applications, because like if you send it early, they may not have had a chance to look at your application, but also it can be annoying to some programs because you're bombarding them while they're going through hundreds of applications. So I did wait like a couple of weeks before I sent mine. I don't know if you sent any or if you did the same
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, so I did send them, but I never heard back. I just feel like once it's September 1st, nobody's gonna, I think they honestly have all your emails blocked because they don't get back to you. They just have so many emails coming in, they're not gonna reply. I think the few programs that you really want to at least be considered at, like your dream programs, I would email like way before. So like June or July or August, you know, just because then I feel like they're not thinking about the match yet. They're kind of just working. So when an email comes, they can actually read it, maybe reply even, you know, but they won't have your application. You're just doing that to introduce yourself to them. And then you can always send a follow-up email in October when they do have your application. I didn't do this. I regret not doing this. I waited till the end, but then I think by that point they were just getting so many emails that it was just pointless. So, and I think I said this on one of my other interviews that I did with Match Resident, that to email early, but if you haven't so far, it's okay. Just wait. Hopefully you get enough interviews that you feel safe enough to go into the match with these many. If you don't, then message me maybe, and then we can figure out what you can do. Yeah, I went so far, even I was calling programs at the end because I was like, listen, these interviews are being hella slow. Nothing's coming in. So I would just call, and sometimes you pick up, the secretary picks up. Sometimes I left messages for the program director. Granted, like, it never resulted to an interview, but at least I felt better that I was making some effort because I was losing my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, it's very demoralizing when interviews come in slowly and not receiving any. But I just want to say, like, in my case, when I did send out my emails of interest, I actually got replies to, I think I sent out like, I can't remember how many I sent out, but I got like a good 4 or 5 replies. Okay, and a few of them actually ended up interviewing me and putting me on wait lists. So when you do want to send out email of interest, make sure you do structure it properly, like explain why, keep it short and sweet. I'm happy to share like my email of interest if people want to DM me as well, and how I went about it, because like the shorter and sweeter it is, and like just straight to the point, they're like, okay, like, you know what, maybe we'll consider this person.
Yeah.
Okay, so how many interviews should we aim to get to have a good chance of matching?
So there's no magic number. I wish there was. So before I applied, when I was in the match cycle, I heard of people getting 2 interviews and matching. I also heard of people getting like 10, 11 interviews and not matching. Yeah. So what I took away from that is that you just somebody needs to love you, like fall in love with you. It's like dating. Like you can go on a million dates, but like one of them needs to want to date you for a long time. So it's just about that. And then, so for example, I had 5 interviews only, and then I only ranked 4 because one program did pre-match and didn't even tell me about it. So I went in with only 4 interviews. I was so nervous, but then I matched. So, you know, it's just about making a connection with at least one, if not more programs, you know. So whatever you need to do to make that happen, do it.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's so easy to go online and look at, oh, this person got 20, this person got 30 or whatever, and then feel like, oh, crap, like that's not me. And again, I'm the same with you. Like, I was just like, I just needed that one interview. And I've been told, like, you know, people get one interview and one is more than enough.
Yeah.
So I know, like, for all of you guys who are listening, you're like, oh, I still want like 10, I want 15 or whatever it is. But if you do amazingly and you're one, like, that's your shoe in. And like similar to Meher, like I didn't rank all my interviews because there were some of them where I just felt like I don't think I would like to be there, and then there were times where like I feel like this is where I wanted to be, so I ended up just ranking. I think I had 7 interviews in total and I ranked 5. So
that's ballsy. I don't think I would have the balls to do that. I would rank all 7.
Yeah,
but
so I was.
It depends on.
I mean, yeah, it definitely varies from person to person, but like the number of interviews doesn't determine your chance of matching, because with both of us match with like all of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question. I applied to anesthesiology. Any questions that surprised you? I guess that's for me. A question that surprised me wasn't even related to anesthesiology. It was the fact that when I went into the room, my program director, instead of him asking me questions, the first things he said to me was, "What are your questions for me?" So I was like, "Oh, wow, I didn't expect that." So I literally said that. Then I sat down and gathered my thoughts and asked my questions. And I think it's okay to sometimes like be honest and be like, "Oh, I didn't expect that," and then like he kind of like chuckled a little, and I was like, "Okay, well, like give me a second, let me think about it." And that's fine, you know, like you're showing them that you're human, that you're not this robot who thought everything through and know every situation that's coming. So that question surprised me a lot because I didn't expect that, and that's not anesthesiology related, that's to everyone. In terms of anesthesia related questions, I mean, again, it's not specific to anesthesia. Like, one of the questions that I had was, you know, like a lot of things happen in the OR, like as an anesthesiologist, like you may end up having like death, like on the table. How would you deal with that? So it's more a question of how do you deal with stress? And I think that that's a question that you can be asked in any specialty and any interview. And when I responded to the question, I told them that sometimes I just go home and cry. And again, they were like, "Oh, that's so honest. Thanks for being honest." And like, sometimes honesty is like can go a long way for you, as long as it's not like a silly answer, you know. Like I was like, "Yeah, sometimes I just go home and cry and let it out," and then they were like, "Oh, well, you're human, so that's what it is."
Yeah, I agree. That was good. When they ask why you want this specialty, how can my answer stand out, since almost everyone will have the same answer? But I think everyone chooses a specialty for different reasons, you know. Like, I mean, even like, let's say, for example, psych, right? I'm choosing psych for one reason. I'm sure the others are choosing it for whatever reasons that led them to it. So I think just be honest, like honestly say why. If you were like, you know, just genuinely say why, reflect on why you want this. Like, now is the time to do lots of reflection and really think about why you're applying for this specialty, and you know, will you be happy in it? Especially people for applying to dual specialties, they will, you know, you'll have to, like, let's say you're doing IM and peds and you don't really care either one, or you really want IM, you don't want peds, vice versa. Think about why, you know, you want each one or you don't. This is your time to kind of reflect. So I think just be honest, whatever the reason is, just say it. I don't think there's a right or wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely like what I think too. Like, just because everyone has different reasons, being honest. And also one thing that I found really helpful was when I was reflecting on why a certain specialty, I always thought back to a specific doctor that stood out to me in that specialty, and I would share like why this doctor like kind of drew me towards that specialty. And that's helpful because like, oh, okay, like this is what they got from their experience as a medical student.
Yeah, some people have known they want to do it for years, and some people realize in their third year of med school. So you just mention your journey, and whatever it is will be fine.
Okay.
Is it important to know which fellowship you're leaning towards? I'm still confused between child and addiction. No, it's absolutely not. You don't even have to mention it if you don't want to. Like, they don't expect you to even know. You change so much during residency. So even if you can say, even if you say like, honestly, I don't know, I need to see more of it to know, that's fine. Like, you don't have to know.
Okay. The next one. Oh, after scheduling an interview, do we expect confirmation from the program? Not always. So sometimes, depending on the portal they use, if it's scheduled and it says scheduled, you may not get confirmation until like a week before when they send out the details for that. So don't be like afraid if you don't hear back. If it says scheduled, you're scheduled.
Correct. Doing an away, will it help get an interview? I 100% agree. I think if you do an away rotation during interview season, so between now and January, you can almost go up to the program director and be like, hey, I'm here. I've been doing really great. Like, I haven't got an interview so far. I just wanted to see if, I could get an interview. I've really enjoyed my time here, blah, blah, blah. I think aways are a great way to get an interview. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, just try, because the worst thing someone can say is no.
Yeah.
It's worth a try for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not IMG certified yet. Once I do certify, do I email all of them to check the ERS portal? Yeah, I definitely would send an update to let them know that you are now certified. They will get like a notification, but sending an email as well helps because you're personally telling them, and they will look back on your application, which a few of my friends last year did do as well.
Okay. We're going to do a few more questions and then we may have to end it because it doesn't save if it's more than 45 minutes.
Yeah, and we're both working and have to.
Yeah. So quickly, a lot of the program directors are saying, please don't email since they're overwhelmed. Should we still email?
No. I mean, for my personal opinion is, if they tell you not to email, don't email. If they don't say anything, it's fine to email. Yeah. But if they specifically say no, like emailing them would just reflect badly on you.
Yeah.
Because the first thing they see about you, this person isn't listening to what I said.
Yeah, if they say it, don't do it. But if they don't say it, then you can do what you want. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think Cynthia will share the template that she used for the letter of interest. You can DM her and she'll tell you.
I'll share that.
I'm not going to go over the questions we already talked about. How many programs to apply for a specialty, I think they mean. Honestly, apply to as many as you want. I applied to 147 just for psych. No, 137 for psych, 10 for IM. And then I added 20 more programs for psych later in November because I was freaking out, but then it didn't help because I didn't get any of those interviews. So it just depends. What's the aim? Is the aim to match, or is the aim to match only at the program you really want? It all depends on your scores, how much money you have, and how many programs you want to apply to.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like in my case, I actually only applied to 14 programs.
Oh my God, yeah.
But I was very restricted to where I could apply to. So like if you are restricted and you can't apply to more programs, then that's fine. And that's why for me personally, like letters of interest was so important. So I think the rest of the questions are kind of repeated to what we said. So I feel like maybe we can both wrap up with like 3 or 4 main points that we both think are important that everyone can take away from today.
Yes. So, okay, couple of my key points. Make sure your setup is good. Make sure you look good. Prepare some of the common answers. Why psych? Why anesthesia? Why this program? Keep those ready, and strengths and weaknesses. And I think the last thing is practice the interview. Practice answering the questions out loud. Record yourself or in your head. And so that on the final day, it feels more like a conversation. It should feel like a conversation. Don't make it feel awkward and like, with all these awkward silences, it should feel like a conversation.
For me, I think one very important thing that I personally did, and I think most people should do, is print out your ERAS CV or like your application and like brainstorm around that. Like, oh, I wrote this on my CV. What do I mean by it? Because they do ask you questions about that. So brainstorm your CV because that's like important to talk about. Also, make sure you research each program you like get an interview from because you want to know that you want to show them you know the program. And finally, like if they tell you in advance who your interviewers are, which I did get sometimes, like, Dr. So-and-so is interviewing you, read about them, look them up, look up their research, because you want to show them that you know them and you're interested in what they do.
Yeah, I agree. Printing out the CV and actually print out your entire application, because sometimes they may reference something and you may even have forgotten that you have that in your application somewhere. So it's good to have it in front of you so you can always just look back at it and then be like, oh yeah, I did this, and then talk about it.
And it's completely fine to have printouts and a notebook with you, like next to your screen when you're doing this, because you can have like little dot points and stuff that you can look back on.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna end it because they won't save, and then no, you can't go back to it.
Yeah.
But thank you, Cynthia.
Thanks, Meher. It was so great to speak to you.
Do this with you, and if you have any other questions, you guys just DM us separately. We can answer it. You kind of know, what specialty we are and stuff now. And then, yeah, that's about it. I think I'm gonna do a live specifically for psych. I think on the weekend, so people who follow me, you guys will see that. And then, yeah, and then that's all.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone, and good luck. And any questions, we're here for you guys.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.